Hey there, welcome back. You've survived Unit 1. Hopefully that's encouraging to you. I'm going to go ahead and I always like to start with the syllabus, like I mentioned previously, so we're going to go ahead and find that. Be reminded that the course rubrics are also right there, so if you ever kind of feel a little bit at a loss, make sure you're a little worried maybe that you're on the right track. You might want to check those rubrics. The way I use rubrics, kind of a philosophical thing, is more the idea that I like to give them as expectations for students, and they are the guiding parts of how I grade. I read them over, but I'm not going to give you a rubric back very often with the different areas marked. I'm going to give you more holistic comments. So sort of a blended type of approach to using a rubric. All right, hopefully everybody has their textbooks and we've got all the kinks worked out of the system and we understand how to use everything, and some of the initial issues that we always have in launching a class hopefully are over by now. And we're going to move on to the theme of what is our role as teacher. It's interesting, I just had a in-depth conversation about this with my son's middle school principal. She's a real wonderful woman, and has actually asked me for some of my opinions on some things, and I really appreciated that about her. Our topic of conversation was role of the teacher, because the role of the teacher is definitely changing. The role of what we saw teachers doing for us and what our parents saw teachers doing for them has slowly changed, and I would challenge you to rethink that role in light of a new type of student, and in light of the fact that our concept of education came out of the Industrial Revolution, which was more of a factory model of education where every child gets a curriculum and they move on from grade to grade, and we impart the information and they learn it and absorb it and spit out the assessment. And we all know, even if as I'm saying that that's not really how people work. You can't create people on a factory line. So that should affect how we think of our role. I also think that we're seeing a family shift at home, and many of our children, all ages, are coming to us possibly with very few adult role models in the home. One of my friends who teaches in Indianapolis Public Schools was doing a health unit, and she asked the kids what they had for supper as part of like a health journal. And one of the kids said, "What do you mean supper? I ate breakfast and dinner at school, or breakfast and lunch at school, but we don't have supper at our house." Pause on that for a second. Okay? Your role is going to be very diverse. And I don't say that to overwhelm you. I say that to empower you to think differently about your role. Some of you are seasoned veteran teachers, and you know what I'm talking about. But I also know, as a seasoned veteran teacher, it's hard for me to take what seems to be working for the majority of the students and change it up to capture my outliers. I am much more comfortable controlling the agenda of my class than I am with this concept of student-based learning or inquiry-based learning, or you know what I'm saying, right? So what I want you to think about is the student. I want you to recognize that there is content that needs to be learned, but the how you do it is going to depend somewhat on what you see your role as. And steer away from those kind of immediate answers. Yes, we have some things. Oh, I want to be that person that met, what do you mean by that? What's that going to look like? And how is that going to affect the way you structure your classroom? Because that's the how part, right? We know what the target is. How are we going to get there? What are we going to do today to make that happen? So that's my little thought on this topic for the next 2 weeks. Remember that in week 1 of any unit, my little note here, that week 1, Sunday at midnight, we're going to have the readings done, videos watched, initial discussion and blog posts made, and we're not going to worry about replying or digging as deep until the second week of the unit, okay? So it's sort of a collect, respond, and then reply and apply, okay? That's sort of the overall general direction I'm trying to go here. Okay, so a couple things we're going to be reading this week. This would have been nice to have last week when you didn't have your textbook, since these are almost all online. Looks like all online readings for this unit. I have 3 articles from Faculty Focus, and again, Faculty Focus is the audience is meant to be college professors, but I do think there's a lot to be said about what we can apply. I think a lot of us are flexible enough that we can fill in some gaps and see our own kids' age in mind here. The first one is called Keeping Introverts in Mind in Your Classroom, in your active classroom, because I'm really going to push for an active classroom, but I also know that there are those kids who that just scares them to death, okay? That is very overwhelming to them, and how can we keep them in mind and be sensitive to all types of learners as we're trying to keep our classrooms active and a little bit more out of the box. And maybe it's not just introverts up here that I'm speaking of, but maybe the kids where traditional education works for them because they're good compliers, they're good desk learners. What are they going to do when you mix your class up a little bit? So just being aware of all types of learners. The second one is first day of class activities that create a climate for learning. I'm a big fan of jumping right out of the chute, setting a tone. And some of you are in the middle of your teaching year. And you can't really do a whole do-over, but I also believe that you're never too far in to do a reset and a recalibration. My husband and I talk about this a lot. He's a marriage counselor for like 10 years, and now he's in sales. Go figure, right? He said he's just selling a different thing now. But we always talk about just that 20% off, like that degree of just being a little bit off, how it can over time just kind of wear on you and if you think about a tire that's not quite aligned on your car and what it does in just a few miles of driving on it. So it's not too late to recalibrate, and I think sometimes the beginning of a semester is a good time to do that. These are all first day activities, but I think a lot of them have good writing classroom implications, and that's why I threw them in here. This one is, again, something about doing things on the first day of class. The videos this week we'll talk about in a moment. I know there is a guest lecture and it wasn't working, but I think I got it fixed. Please let me know if it's still not fixed. It's actually a guest lecturer who's one of the dearest people to me in the world. She's my teaching partner. Just wanted to give you a little introduction to her. She's a fabulous teacher. She is a professor at University of Cincinnati as well. She kind of has her hand in 2 different pots right now, and she's doing a fabulous job with it. Okay, little sales pitch there, and here we go. Discussion board. Oh, and I should say the reason I put her video in this week is she's one of the people that keeps me thinking outside of the box about my role and how to structure our classroom. We just redid our online classroom to make the announcements look like a playlist on an iPad. It was a huge project yesterday, but it's so cool. The kids have basically a playlist that they enter into our class and they click on. You could really do this if you had the iPad type thing. You could create a playlist for your students. That lots of cool potential. But anyway, I digress. Here we go. Just wanted to let you know that I do try to practice what I preach, and we're trying to set a climate for learning. Okay, discussion board this week. What are your experiences with writing workshops? The whole Atwell approach is a workshop-based approach, and I'm not going to say that there's any silver bullet in education, if there's one way you have to teach, but I'm going to tell you that I've had a lot of success with at least some aspect of writing workshop as a teacher. But I want to know what your experiences are, because sometimes our experiences as learners drive our process, and some of you have had experience teaching, and I'd like to hear your impression. And you can be totally honest. You're not going to hurt my feelings, okay? How can impressions, this is what I really want to dwell on, how can impressions and past impressions shape a student's learning as they enter the writing classroom? What do you bring with you as a learner when you enter a classroom that's already setting the tone? And you can take these things from your own experience. You can take these things from some of the readings that you're surmising and that kind of thing, or you can kind of make a guess. But I want us to think empathetically about the learner so that we can better understand our role as teacher. Okay, the blog is in green this week because this is going to be a blog that we put in the wiki. So anytime a blog shows up in green, please make note that it's supposed to be transferred to your final wiki. So when you go back and do that final portfolio, it gets shoved in there, okay? It says make your own top list of top 5 activities for creating tone in classroom. This can be from these sources. You can use exactly what they said. You can use things that have already worked for you. You can use things that maybe you've read elsewhere. Do cite your sources, even if a source is maybe another teacher. Let's give credit where credit's due, right? Teachers kind of get the shaft sometimes on that. So I want to share with you while we go over to the classroom here real quick, I want to share with you some of my favorite go-to things. I taught a lot of different grade levels when I taught in a K-12 building, and I really thought through this whole idea of how I wanted to set the tone in my classroom. So one of the things that I did was I tried to think on 2 levels. One was, what one big thing do I want my students to walk away with from the year? What's going to be our primary objective? And if I could just summarize the whole course into one thing. And I would try to play off of that in the assignment. And the other thing I tried to think of is age and development. So since I taught 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade students, I tried to think of what they could connect with. And one of my favorite activities was to do it in 10th grade. I wanted to do a couple things. One, I wanted to be age appropriate sensitive. I noticed that sophomores are going through a lot of changes. It's the year of the driver's license. It's the year of high stakes testing. I found that a lot of friendships shifted that year, and just a lot of firsts in terms of just rite of passage stuff. They looked totally different than they did their freshman year. I mean, it's just a lot of changes. So I wanted to acknowledge that there's a lot going on inside that people don't see, and there's a lot going on outside that people may see. And students at that age especially liked the idea, or like to talk about the idea of feeling misunderstood sometimes, and having people they're very sensitive to stereotypes and being cast into a certain mold. So I had them create a box. I had them do this at home. You could do it in a classroom, but I had them do it at home for this reason. I wanted them to create it in private, and I asked them to take the box and on the inside fill it with things that people may not know about them, anything they were comfortable sharing, things that were maybe their true likes and things that people couldn't just see on the outside. The outside then was all the things that people probably see. Descriptive words, cut out pieces of paper, glitter and glue, the whole 9 yards, right? Then they brought those into school in black bags or black plastic bags or paper bags, something that no one could see. They brought them and dropped them off at my room in the morning, and then I would go and number them. The first step of the activity was that every student went through the room and tried to make a guess as to who the student was, and they also then tried to describe what they thought was being represented by the inside and the outside of the box. It set us up for some tremendous characterization studies, some tremendous self-awareness, personal essay writing, and it was a great intro into the book, A Separate Piece, that we read in the fall of their sophomore year. So that is just one of my kind of exciting little fun things that I did. I did lots of different things with it through the years, but it was always a very well-received activity. The students really liked expressing. Okay, so I think the only video we have this week is the guest lecture. I wanted to double check that. So 3 readings and a guest lecture, not real heavy this week. Maybe it's a good week to catch up if you're a little behind on the Outwell. Have a great week. I know I talk a mile a minute, but keep the questions coming and let me know if you need anything. Thanks.